The committee room fell silent as the final words echoed through the chamber. Senator Schiff, let me show you a recording. This one is from March 2020, just 3 months after your Ukraine conversation with Jake Tapper. Vice President Vance's voice carried across the secure facility with the calm certainty of a man who had spent weeks preparing for this exact moment. Not loud, not theatrical, just steady and relentless like water wearing down stone. It was December 3rd, 2026, and the temperature in SCIF Alpha had dropped to exactly 68 degrees. The way these secure facilities were always kept, cold enough to keep electronics running smoothly, cold enough to make people uncomfortable after a few hours. Adam Schiff felt that cold now, seeping through his dark wool suit, settling into his bones, though whether from the air conditioning or from the creeping realization that his entire world was collapsing around him, he couldn't say. Across the table, Vance sat perfectly still, his hands resting flat on the polished wood surface, flanked by the 3 most powerful intelligence officials in the United States government. NSA Director General Sarah Mitchell looked like she hadn't slept in days, her gray-streaked hair pulled back severely, her eyes carrying the weight of someone who'd spent 18 months building an airtight case against a sitting United States senator. FBI Director Christopher Wray sat to her left, his expression carved from granite, a career law enforcement officer who'd prosecuted mob bosses and terrorists, and now found himself prosecuting a member of Congress. Director of National Intelligence, Admiral James Reynolds occupied the right position, a former submarine commander who'd spent decades in the silent service and understood better than anyone how secrets could kill. Behind them, arranged in a semicircle like judges at an inquisition, sat the members of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. Chairman Mark Warner from Virginia, his face ashen, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past 4 hours. Vice Chairman Marco Rubio from Florida, his jaw set, anger flickering behind his eyes at the betrayal of institutional trust. Susan Collins from Maine, Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas, Angus King from Maine, all of them looking like they'd rather be anywhere else, but knowing this was too important to avoid. Schiff's throat felt like sandpaper. His hands, which had gripped the table edge for the past hour, had gone numb. He'd arrived at 5 o'clock thinking this was routine oversight, maybe some questions about leak investigations he'd been involved in during his time as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, nothing he couldn't handle. He'd testified before Congress hundreds of times. He knew how to navigate hostile questioning, how to deflect, how to pivot to his talking points about protecting democracy. But this wasn't hostile questioning. This was an execution, methodical and precise, and he was the condemned man watching his own firing squad load their weapons with evidence he couldn't dispute. Vance reached forward and pressed the audio playback button again. The speakers crackled to life with Adam Schiff's voice, unmistakable, undeniable, filling the room like an accusation made flesh. Adam, this is exactly the kind of information we need. Can you confirm these details are from the classified briefing? The voice belonged to Adam Goldman, reporter for the New York Times, one of the most respected national security journalists in the country. Schiff's recorded voice responded immediately. Yes, this came directly from yesterday's briefing on Russian interference operations. The intelligence is explosive. The assessment shows systematic coordination between Russian military intelligence, the GRU specifically, and multiple social media influence campaigns targeting swing states. The intercepts we have are damning, Adam. This goes way beyond what we've disclosed publicly. Goldman's voice eager. Can I run with this? What's your confidence level? Schiff's voice confident and assured, extremely high. This is solid intelligence from multiple sources. NSA intercepts, Allied intelligence sharing, human intelligence from inside Russia. All of it points to the same conclusion. Putin personally authorized this operation. I'm telling you, Adam, this is bigger than anyone realizes. Vance stopped the playback. Let me show you the timeline. March 14, 2020. You attended a classified briefing on Russian election interference. March 15, 2020. You called Adam Goldman at the New York Times. This call lasted 19 minutes. March 17, 2020. The Times published a front-page story with the exact classified details you disclosed 2 days earlier. He pulled up the New York Times article on the secure monitor. The headline read, "Intelligence assessment shows Russian military-directed social media operations targeting U.S. elections." Below it, the article contained specifics that could only have come from someone in that classified briefing. Details about NSA intercepts, information about Allied intelligence sharing, references to human sources inside Russia, all of it classified, all of it leaked. Senator Collins spoke quietly. "Mr. Vice President, how certain are we that this specific information came from Senator Schiff and not from someone else who attended the same briefing?" NSA Director Mitchell answered, "We're absolutely certain, Senator. We tracked everyone who attended that March 14th briefing. There were 12 members of Congress present. We analyzed their subsequent communications. Only Senator Schiff called a journalist within 24 hours. Only Senator Schiff had a 19-minute conversation that matches the timing and duration for transmitting this volume of information. And only Senator Schiff had a relationship with Adam Goldman that included previous leaks we've documented." She pulled up phone records showing a pattern of calls between Schiff and Goldman dating back to 2019. The pattern was unmistakable. After major classified briefings, Schiff would call Goldman within hours. The calls would last 15 to 25 minutes, long enough to provide detailed background but not so long as to seem suspicious if anyone checked call logs. Then, within 48 to 72 hours, the Times would publish stories containing classified information from those briefings. Vance continued, "Let me show you another example. June 8, 2021. You attended a classified briefing on Iranian nuclear enrichment activities. This briefing was extremely sensitive because it involved intelligence from a human source inside Iran's nuclear program, one of our most valuable assets in that country." He paused, letting the significance sink in. "That same afternoon, you called Shane Harris at the Washington Post. Let me play you that call." Another recording. Schiff's voice, speaking with the same confident authority he'd used on countless cable news appearances. "Shane, I just came from a briefing that's absolutely chilling. The intelligence on Iran's nuclear program shows they're much further along than we've publicly acknowledged. They've reached 60% enrichment at Fordo. The assessment says there may be 3 to 4 months from weapons-grade material if they decide to push forward." Shane Harris's voice. "That's significantly shorter than previous estimates. Can you give me more details?" Schiff's voice. "The source of this intelligence is extremely sensitive, so obviously we can't identify them. But this is human intelligence from inside Iran's program, someone with direct access to enrichment activities. The assessment describes this as significantly reducing breakout time to weapons-grade material." Those are the exact words from the briefing document. Harris, "When can I publish?" Schiff, "Tomorrow would be ideal. This needs to get out before the Foreign Relations Committee votes on the Iran bill. Public pressure might change some votes." Vance stopped the recording. 2 days after this call, the Washington Post ran a story with those exact details. The phrase, "significantly reducing breakout time to weapons-grade material," appeared verbatim. That phrase came from a classified intelligence assessment that only 12 people had access to. You were one of them. He pulled up a damage assessment document, most of it redacted even in this secure setting. "What you couldn't know, Senator, is that Iranian counterintelligence is very sophisticated. When that Post article appeared with specific details about enrichment levels at Fordo and language about breakout time, they conducted an internal investigation. Within 2 weeks, they identified and arrested our source. He was executed 3 months later." The room went completely silent. Even the air circulation system seemed to stop. Schiff felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. His face went from pale to gray. Admiral Reynolds spoke up, his voice heavy with disgust. His name was Reza Ahmadi. He was a mid-level technician at the Fordo facility who'd been passing intelligence to CIA for 3 years. He had a wife and 2 daughters. When the Iranians arrested him, they arrested his family too. His wife was sentenced to 15 years in prison. His daughters, aged 12 and 9, are in state custody. We don't know what happened to them. Reynolds looked directly at Schiff. "You killed him, Senator. You wanted to influence a congressional vote, so you leaked classified intelligence to the Washington Post. That leak allowed Iranian counterintelligence to identify the source. They executed him. His family was destroyed. Also, you could apply pressure on the Foreign Relations Committee." Schiff's voice came out as a whisper. "I didn't know. I couldn't have known that would happen." "Ignorance isn't a defense," Vance said coldly. "When you took an oath to protect classified information, you accepted responsibility for the consequences of disclosing it. You knew that leaking intelligence could burn sources. You knew it could compromise operations. You knew it could get people killed. You did it anyway because you wanted to be on television, wanted to damage Trump, wanted to position yourself as the serious national security expert." He pulled up another series of recordings. "Let me show you the pattern of your relationship with CNN. Between January 2019 and December 2022, you called Jake Tapper 47 times. Not all of those calls involved classified leaks, but 17 of them occurred within 24 hours of you attending classified briefings. Let me play you 3 of those calls in sequence so you can hear how systematic this was." First recording, dated May 2020. Schiff's voice. "Jake, I'm calling from my office. I just left a briefing on Chinese cyber operations against critical infrastructure. This is beyond alarming. The intelligence shows Chinese military hackers have penetrated systems controlling power grids, water treatment facilities, telecommunications networks. We're talking about capabilities to shut down major cities if they wanted to." Tapper's voice. "How solid is this intelligence?" Schiff, "Rock solid. NSA intercepts, malware analysis, testimony from cybersecurity firms who have examined the intrusions. All of it confirms systematic Chinese military targeting of our critical infrastructure." Tapper, "Can we run this tonight?" Schiff, "Please do. The American people need to understand the threat. Just use anonymous sources familiar with the intelligence. I'll be available if your producers need background verification." Second recording, September 2020. Schiff's voice. "Jake, urgent call. I just came from a briefing on Russian ransomware operations. The intelligence shows direct links between Russian intelligence services and ransomware gangs targeting U.S. companies. This isn't just criminal activity. This is state-sponsored economic warfare." Tapper, "Do we have proof of Russian government involvement?" Schiff, "Absolutely. Financial transfers from Russian intelligence front companies to ransomware operators. Communications showing FSB officers directing specific targets. The assessment concludes this is officially sanctioned by the Kremlin." Tapper, "When can I air it?" Schiff, "Tonight if possible. This is too important to sit on." Third recording, March 2021. Schiff's voice. "Jake, another one. Just finished a briefing on North Korea's nuclear weapons program. The intelligence shows they've miniaturized warheads to fit on ICBMs. This means they have operational capability to strike the United States. The assessment says they have between 20 and 30 warheads ready for deployment." Tapper, "That's a significant escalation from previous estimates." Schiff, "Exactly. And the public doesn't know because the intelligence community has been downplaying the threat. But the intercepts we have show North Korean officials discussing operational readiness. This is real, Jake. This is happening now." Vance stopped the recordings. 3 calls, 3 different classified topics, all leaked to CNN within hours of you receiving the briefings. Chinese cyber operations, Russian ransomware, North Korean nuclear capabilities. Each one appeared on CNN within 24 to 48 hours. Each story cited anonymous officials familiar with the intelligence. Each story used phrases and details that came directly from classified assessments you'd just been briefed on. He showed the pattern on a timeline. Red dots representing classified briefings, blue lines connecting to phone calls with Tapper, green markers showing when CNN aired the stories. The pattern repeated over and over for 3 years. Briefing, call, story. Briefing, call, story. 17 times between 2019 and 2022. Senator Rubio asked, "Mr. Vice President, you mentioned Senator Schiff received a book deal from Warner Media, CNN's parent company. Can you provide details on that arrangement? DNI Reynolds pulled up financial records. In February 2020, Senator Schiff signed a publishing agreement with Random House, which at that time was owned by Warner Media. The advance against future royalties was $2.1 million. This is an extraordinarily large advance for a congressional memoir. For context, most political books by members of Congress receive advances in the range of $50,000 to $200,000. He showed publishing economics. To earn back a $2 million advance, a book typically needs to sell between 400,000 and 600,000 copies, depending on the retail price and the author's royalty percentage. Senator Schiff's book, published in October 2021, sold approximately 52,000 copies in its first year. Current lifetime sales are around 78,000 copies. Even with bulk purchases we'll discuss in a moment. This book lost Warner Media approximately $1.3 to $1.5 million. Senator Warner asked quietly, "Publishers do sometimes overpay for political books, betting they'll become bestsellers or generate publicity for their imprint. How do we know this wasn't just a bad business decision? The timing is highly suspicious," Reynolds answered. Senator Schiff became chairman of the House Intelligence Committee in January 2019. In the following 14 months, our analysis shows CNN aired 31 stories citing anonymous intelligence officials that we've traced back to briefings Senator Schiff attended. That's more than double the number from the previous 2 years. He showed the statistical correlation. In February 2020, 14 months into this pattern of intensified leaking to CNN, Warner Media approved the $2 million book deal. Over the next 2 years, the leaks to CNN continued at the same elevated rate. Then, in January 2023, Senator Schiff left the House Intelligence Committee to join the Senate. He remained on the Senate Intelligence Committee, but his access to certain House-specific briefings ended. In the year following his departure from House Intelligence, CNN stories citing intelligence officials dropped by 67%. He pulled up a graph showing the dramatic decline. The pattern suggests CNN wasn't paying for a book. They were paying for access to classified intelligence. When Senator Schiff had maximum access as House Intelligence Chairman, the leaks were frequent and CNN thrived on exclusive national security stories. When his access changed, their stream of leaks dried up. FBI Director Wray added another element. We also identified bulk purchases of Senator Schiff's book by political organizations. Courage to Change PAC, a Democratic fundraising organization, purchased 20,000 copies in November 2021 for approximately $85,000. They distributed maybe 3,000 copies at events and fundraisers. The rest sat in a warehouse. Democracy Alliance, another progressive organization, bought 15,000 copies for $63,000. Similar distribution pattern, most copies never distributed. 5 other Democratic organizations and progressive advocacy groups purchased quantities ranging from 2,000 to 8,000 copies each. Total bulk purchases approximately 83,000 copies, representing about $1.1 million in revenue. He showed the money trail. These bulk buys serve multiple purposes. They inflate sales numbers, helping the book appear on bestseller lists. They guarantee the author hits royalty thresholds even if actual reader purchases are low. And they provide a mechanism for funneling money to politicians through seemingly legitimate publishing channels. The organizations buy books with donor contributions. The publisher counts them as sales. The author receives royalties, and everyone pretends it's normal commerce. Senator Cotton spoke up, his voice hard. So CNN's parent company gave him $2 million while he was feeding classified intelligence to CNN. Then Democratic political organizations bought over 80,000 copies of a book that regular readers weren't buying. This looks like money laundering dressed up as publishing. We can't prove explicit quid pro quo, Wray admitted. Senator Schiff can argue the book deal was legitimate and happened to lose money. He can claim the bulk purchases were genuine political organizations supporting a book they believed in. But the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. He got wealthy from media companies and political organizations while systematically leaking classified intelligence that benefited those exact entities. Vance moved to what he'd called earlier the most explosive element. Let's talk about the Ukraine whistleblower complaint that triggered President Trump's first impeachment. This is where Senator Schiff went beyond leaking into active fabrication and lying. He pulled up video clips from September 2019, during the early days of the Ukraine scandal. Here's what Senator Schiff said on national television about his knowledge of the whistleblower complaint. The montage played. Schiff on CNN, September 20th, 2019, host asking if the Intelligence Committee had spoken with the whistleblower. Schiff responding with certainty. We have not spoken directly with the whistleblower. We would like to, but as you know, the whistleblower has statutory protections and rights to remain anonymous. Schiff on MSNBC, September 22nd. The committee did not receive the complaint directly from the whistleblower. We learned about the existence of the complaint through press reports, just like everyone else. Schiff on Meet the Press, September 24th. I want to be very clear. We had no prior knowledge of the contents of this whistleblower complaint before it came through official channels. This came through the Inspector General, through proper statutory procedures. Schiff at a press conference, September 26th. There has been reporting that committee staff had some contact with the whistleblower. That is not accurate. We have followed all proper procedures and maintained the whistleblower's statutory protections. Vance stopped the videos. He said that repeatedly and definitively. No contact with the whistleblower, no prior knowledge, learned about it through press reports. All lies. Let me show you the truth. FBI Director Wray presented phone records on the secure monitor. These are calls between Daniel Goldman, then serving as senior staff on Chairman Schiff's Intelligence Committee, and a phone number registered to a CIA analyst later, identified as the Ukraine whistleblower. The analyst's identity remains classified even in this setting, so we'll refer to them as Individual A. The records showed a clear pattern. August 8, 2019, Goldman called Individual A, 23-minute call. August 10th, another call, 17 minutes. August 12th, another call, 31 minutes. August 15th, 15-minute call. All of these calls occurred before the formal whistleblower complaint was filed with the Inspector General on August 12th. Wait, Senator King interrupted. You said the complaint was filed August 12th, but one of these calls was August 12th. Was the call before or after the filing? Ray checked his notes. The call was in the morning. The complaint was filed in the afternoon. So the timeline is, Goldman spoke with Individual A on August 8th and 10th, shaping what would be in the complaint. Individual A filed the complaint on the afternoon of August 12th. Goldman called again that evening, likely to confirm the filing had occurred. Then another call on August 15th to discuss next steps. He pulled up additional evidence. We also recovered text messages between Goldman and Individual A. The messages are heavily focused on what should be included in the whistleblower complaint to make it most effective. Goldman suggesting specific statutory references, specific facts to emphasize, specific language that would trigger mandatory reporting to Congress. One text message appeared on screen, dated August 9th, with redactions protecting the whistleblower's identity. From Goldman, make sure to reference the Inspector General statute requiring transmission to intelligence committees. Also emphasize first-hand versus second-hand knowledge to preempt any arguments about hearsay. The more direct witnesses you can cite, the stronger the complaint. Response from Individual A, got it. I'll revise tonight and send you the draft tomorrow. Another text, August 10th. Goldman, this draft is much stronger. The references to specific dates and participants make it impossible to dismiss as rumor. When you file this, make sure to go through official IG channels. That gives it legal protection and forces transmission to Congress. Vance looked at the committee members. This wasn't an independent intelligence community whistleblower coming forward through proper channels. This was Chairman Schiff's staff actively crafting a whistleblower complaint, coaching the individual on what to include, how to structure it legally, how to make it most politically effective. Then, After coordinating this complaint, Schiff went on national television and lied about having any prior knowledge. He played more video clips. Schiff being asked directly by CNN's Anderson Cooper on September 21st. Mr. Chairman, did your staff have any contact with this whistleblower before the complaint was filed? Schiff's response, looking directly at the camera. We have not spoken to the whistleblower. We would like to, but we want to protect the whistleblower's identity and follow all statutory protections. Cooper pressing, but did your staff speak with them? Schiff, the whistleblower contacted the Inspector General. That's the proper procedure. The complaint came to us through official channels. We had no prior involvement in the complaint being filed. That's a direct lie, Vance said flatly. His staff had multiple phone calls and text message exchanges with the whistleblower before the complaint was filed. They shaped the complaint. They coached the individual on how to structure it. They were intimately involved in the complaint being filed. Then Schiff went on television and lied about it to make it appear this was an independent whistleblower rather than a coordinated political operation. Senator Collins asked, did Chairman Schiff know about his staff's contact with the whistleblower when he made those statements? FBI Director Wray answered, we have evidence he did. On August 13th, the day after the complaint was filed, Goldman sent Schiff a detailed email describing the whistleblower's allegations and noting that Goldman had been in contact with individual A to help ensure the complaint was properly structured. Schiff responded, acknowledging the email and approving Goldman's approach. He showed the email on screen, heavily redacted. From Goldman to Schiff, per our conversation yesterday, individual A has filed the complaint with the IG. I've been working with them to ensure all statutory requirements are met, and the complaint includes sufficient detail to trigger mandatory transmission to the committees. The allegations are serious and well documented. Schiff's response, good work. Keep me updated on IG's response. We need to be ready to move quickly once this becomes public. So he knew, Vance said. His staff was coordinating the whistleblower complaint. He was receiving updates on it. He approved the approach. Then he went on television and lied directly to the American people about having no prior knowledge or involvement. He paused, letting it sink in. This wasn't protecting a whistleblower. This was fabricating the predicate for impeachment, then lying about how it was fabricated. That's obstruction. That's making false statements to Congress and the public. That's abuse of his position as Intelligence Committee Chairman. Admiral Reynolds spoke up to describe the broader damage. Senator, the committee should understand the full scope of harm caused by Senator Schiff's unauthorized disclosures over these 5 years. We conducted a comprehensive damage assessment. The specific details remain classified, but I can describe the categories of harm. First, sources and methods. When Senator Schiff leaked details about specific intelligence collection capabilities, foreign adversaries learned how we were gathering information on them. After his March 2020 leak about Russian election interference that mentioned NSA intercepts and allied intelligence sharing, Russia changed its operational security procedures. We lost access to communications channels we'd been monitoring for years. 2 ongoing counterintelligence operations had to be terminated because their coverage was blown. Second, human intelligence sources. The Iranian case I mentioned earlier, Reza Ahmadi, who was executed after Senator Schiff's leak led to his identification. He wasn't the only source compromised. We've identified at least 3 other human sources who were put at risk by Senator Schiff's disclosures. One had to be exfiltrated from China after his June 2021 leak about Chinese cyber operations. Another, a Russian intelligence officer providing information on Moscow's activities, became unreachable after a leak in August 2021 and is presumed compromised or dead. Third, intelligence liaison relationships. The United States maintains intelligence-sharing partnerships with dozens of allied nations. These relationships are built on trust that sensitive information will be protected. When Allied intelligence appeared in New York Times and CNN articles shortly after being shared in classified briefings, our partners lost confidence in our ability to protect their information. The United Kingdom's MI6 reduced intelligence sharing with congressional committees by approximately 40% after 2020. Australia's intelligence services stopped providing certain categories of sensitive information to congressional briefings entirely. These partnerships take decades to build and can be destroyed quickly when classified information leaks. Fourth, operational security for active operations. When Senator Schiff leaked intelligence about planned counterterrorism operations or military activities, he gave adversaries advance warning. In November 2020, he leaked details from a briefing about anticipated ISIS activities in Syria. That leak forced cancellation of a planned operation because ISIS changed its patterns based on what appeared in the Washington Post article. In April 2021, a leak about North Korean missile testing gave Pyongyang information about our technical collection capabilities, forcing adjustments to an intelligence operation that had taken 2 years to establish. Fifth, intelligence community morale and trust. The men and women of our intelligence community risk their lives to collect information that protects this country. When they see their work immediately leaked to the media by the chairman of the Intelligence Oversight Committee, it's devastating to morale. We had analysts refuse to brief Congress on sensitive operations because they didn't trust the information would stay classified. We had case officers in the field expressing concerns that their sources would be burned by congressional leaks. The institutional damage to the relationship between the intelligence community and Congress has been severe and will take years to repair. Reynolds looked at Schiff with unconcealed disgust. You weren't conducting oversight, Senator. You were compromising national security. You burned sources. You terminated operations. You damaged relationships with allies. You forced the intelligence community to withhold information from its congressional overseers because you couldn't be trusted. And you did all of it for television appearances, book deals, and partisan political advantage. The weight of evidence was crushing. 4 hours of testimony. 17 recorded phone calls of Schiff's voice leaking classified intelligence. 83 documented leaks matched to his briefings. Proof he read verbatim from classified documents to reporters. $2 million from CNN's parent company. Bulk book purchases by Democratic organizations. Coordination of the Ukraine whistleblower complaint followed by lying about it. Dead sources, compromised operations, damaged allied relationships. All because one senator decided his political career mattered more than national security. Chairman Warner looked physically ill. The committee had spent all day in this windowless secure facility, breathing recycled air, watching the methodical destruction of a colleague's career and reputation. Warner had known Adam Schiff for years, had worked with him on intelligence matters, had respected his knowledge and dedication. Now he was watching evidence that Schiff had betrayed everything the intelligence community stood for. Senator Schiff, Warner said quietly, you've heard 4 hours of evidence from NSA, FBI, and the Director of National Intelligence. You've heard recordings of your own voice leaking classified information. You've seen phone records, financial documents, text messages, damage assessments. You have an opportunity to respond to these allegations. What do you have to say? Schiff sat frozen for a long moment. His mind was racing through options, each one collapsing immediately under the weight of evidence. Deny the calls happened. They had recordings of his voice. Claim the information wasn't classified. They had the classification markings. Say he was helping the public understand. Leaking classified intelligence was a crime regardless of motivation. Argue he was conducting oversight. Reading classified documents to reporters wasn't oversight. Claim political persecution. The evidence came from 3 separate federal judges, approving FISA warrants based on probable cause. Finally, he spoke, his voice lacking its usual smooth confidence. This entire proceeding is political retaliation. This is the new administration weaponizing the intelligence agencies to punish me for my oversight of Donald Trump. Everything I did was in service of my constitutional duty to inform the American people about threats to our democracy. The president was compromised by Russia. The president was abusing his power. The American people had a right to know. You leaked classified intelligence, Vance interrupted, his voice cutting through Schiff's justifications like a scalpel. We have recordings of you doing it 17 times. We have you reading from classified documents. We have you taking money from CNN while feeding them secrets. We have you lying about the whistleblower. None of that is oversight. That's espionage. I was trying to protect American democracy. Schiff's voice rose defensively. Protect democracy by committing felonies? Vance asked. By reading NSA intercepts to reporters. By taking $2 million from a media company you were leaking to. By fabricating a whistleblower complaint then lying about it. That's not protecting democracy. That's advancing your career and your bank account at the expense of national security. Senator Rubio leaned forward. Senator Schiff, I want to give you a chance to address the specific allegations clearly. Did you call Jake Tapper on December 18, 2019, and disclose classified intelligence about Ukraine? Silent, Schiff stared at the table. Did you receive a $2.1 million book deal from Warner Media, while systematically leaking classified information to CNN? More silence. Did your staff coordinate with the Ukraine whistleblower before the complaint was filed? And then, did you lie about having prior knowledge? Still silence. Did you read classified intelligence assessments verbatim to reporters, resulting in those assessments being published in newspapers? Schiff looked up, his face drawn. I need to consult with my attorney before answering these questions. Your attorney isn't here, Warner reminded him, almost gently. You declined to wait for him to obtain appropriate security clearances. We can recess if you'd like time to arrange legal counsel, but that will take weeks. No, Schiff's voice was firmer now, the voice of a lawyer who'd prosecuted cases before becoming a congressman, who understood the legal jeopardy he faced. I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. I decline to answer these questions on the grounds that my answers might incriminate me. The room erupted in shocked murmuring. A sitting United States senator taking the fifth when asked about leaking classified intelligence. The implications were staggering. Taking the fifth was a constitutional right, perfectly legal, but it looked terrible. It suggested guilt. It confirmed he understood the criminal exposure he faced. Vance waited for silence, then proceeded methodically. Did you leak classified intelligence to journalists between 2019 and 2023? I invoke my Fifth Amendment rights. Did you read from classified documents during phone calls with reporters? Fifth Amendment. Did you receive money from media companies you were leaking classified information to? Fifth Amendment. Did you coordinate the Ukraine whistleblower complaint with your staff, then lie about it publicly? Fifth Amendment. Did your leaks result in the compromise of intelligence sources and operations? Fifth Amendment. Vance sat back. Let the record reflect that Senator Schiff has invoked his Fifth Amendment rights rather than answer questions about his unauthorized disclosure of classified intelligence, his financial relationships with media companies, and his coordination of the Ukraine whistleblower complaint. Senator Cotton spoke, his voice hard as iron. Mr. Vice President, based on the evidence presented today, I move that this committee recommend the full Senate vote on expulsion of Senator Schiff for conduct unbecoming a member of the Senate and for systematic compromise of national security. I second the motion, Senator Rubio said immediately. The motion is in order, Warner said heavily. We'll have brief discussion, then vote. The discussion was brief and painful. Even the Democrats on the committee couldn't find ways to defend the evidence. The recordings were Schiff's voice. The leaks matched his briefings. The money came from CNN. The whistleblower coordination was documented. The damage to intelligence operations was real. Senator King spoke for several Democrats. I've known Adam Schiff for years. I've respected his intelligence work. I believed he was acting in good faith during the Trump investigations. But this evidence is overwhelming. If a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee is systematically leaking classified information, accepting payment from media companies, coordinating whistleblower complaints then lying about it, compromising intelligence sources and operations, that member cannot continue to serve. This isn't about politics. This is about fundamental duty to protect classified information. I'll vote for recommending expulsion. The vote was 15-0. Every Democrat, every Republican, every independent voted to recommend expulsion. Warner looked at Schiff with something like sadness. Senator, this committee unanimously recommends your expulsion from the United States Senate. The full Senate will vote on this recommendation. Based on the evidence presented today, I expect that vote will pass with a substantial bipartisan majority. You should consider resigning before that vote occurs. You have a family, a legacy. Don't make them watch you be expelled. Schiff stood, his legs unsteady. This is the end of democracy, when speaking truth to power becomes a crime, when congressional oversight is criminalized, when senators who try to protect this country from a corrupt president are persecuted. This is how democracies die. When senators leak classified intelligence for personal gain, they go to prison, Vance said quietly. That's not the end of democracy. That's the rule of law. You weren't speaking truth to power. You were reading classified documents to reporters for money and fame. You weren't conducting oversight. You were committing espionage. And now you're facing the consequences. As Schiff walked toward the SCIF exit, his footsteps echoing in the cold, secure facility, FBI agents were waiting in the corridor outside. Adam Schiff, you're under arrest for unauthorized disclosure of classified information in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 1798, conspiracy to defraud the United States in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 371, and making false statements to Congress in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 1001. The handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. The Miranda warnings were read in the formal monotone of federal agents who'd done this thousands of times. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. The senator who had impeached a president, who had been the face of Democratic resistance for 6 years, who had written a best-selling book about defending democracy, was led through the Capitol basement in handcuffs by FBI agents. His career, his reputation, his freedom, all collapsing in the space of 4 hours because he thought being famous made him untouchable. Within 2 hours, the news leaked. Not the classified details of the evidence, those remained secure, but enough information escaped to make it the biggest political story in years. Senator Adam Schiff, arrested on espionage charges. FBI presents evidence of systematic leaking to CNN and New York Times. Schiff takes Fifth Amendment on all questions. Intelligence officials testify to compromised sources and operations. By morning, it dominated every news network. Even outlets that had featured Schiff regularly for years struggled to defend him. The evidence was too strong, the recordings of his voice too clear, taking the Fifth too damning. Progressive commentators tried to frame it as political persecution, but the bipartisan committee vote for expulsion undermined that narrative. When Democrats and Republicans unanimously agreed the evidence was overwhelming, it was hard to claim this was partisan. CNN faced its own crisis. Their most valuable source of classified intelligence had been arrested for leaking that intelligence. Their parent company had paid him $2 million for a book that lost money. The optics were terrible. Internal investigations began immediately. Jake Tapper issued a statement saying he'd believed his anonymous sources were providing properly declassified information for oversight purposes, and was shocked to learn his source had been reading from classified documents. The Senate moved quickly. Within a week, the full body voted on Schiff's expulsion. The debate was somber. Senators from both parties acknowledged the seriousness of the charges, the strength of the evidence, the damage to national security. Some Democrats argued for waiting until the criminal trial concluded, letting the courts determine guilt. But most senators believed the evidence was strong enough and the breach of trust severe enough to warrant immediate expulsion. The final vote was 78-22, well over the two-thirds majority required for expulsion. Even many Democrats voted to expel, recognizing that a senator who took the Fifth when asked about leaking classified intelligence couldn't be trusted with continued access to secrets. Adam Schiff became only the 16th senator expelled in American history, and the first expelled for intelligence leaking. His Senate career lasted less than 4 years. The criminal trial began in April 2027 in federal court in Alexandria, Virginia, where many national security cases were prosecuted because of the court's proximity to Washington and its experience handling classified information. Judge Patricia Harrington presided, a no-nonsense former prosecutor with 2 decades on the bench. The prosecution presented its case methodically over 6 weeks. The phone recordings played in open court, Schiff's voice leaking classified intelligence over and over. The timeline showing 83 leaks matched to his briefings. The classified documents he'd read from compared to published articles containing identical language. The $2 million book deal from CNN's parent company. The text messages with the Ukraine whistleblower. The damage assessments describing compromised sources and terminated operations. Schiff's defense team, led by prominent Washington attorney Theodore Olson, tried multiple strategies. They argued Schiff had been exercising his oversight duties, helping the public understand critical national security threats. The prosecution countered that leaking classified intelligence was illegal regardless of motivation. They argued the First Amendment protected communications with the press. The judge ruled that constitutional protections don't cover disclosure of classified information. They argued the evidence was obtained through politically motivated surveillance. The judge reviewed the 3 separate FISA warrant approvals and found they met legal standards for probable cause. They tried to argue that the information Schiff disclosed wasn't truly classified or had been improperly classified, but the prosecution showed classification markings, demonstrated the information met statutory definitions of classified intelligence, and presented testimony from classification authorities confirming proper procedures had been followed. Finally, they suggested selective prosecution, arguing that many government officials leaked to the press, but Schiff was being prosecuted because of his opposition to Trump. The prosecution demolished this by showing the systematic nature of his leaking, the volume of classified disclosures, the financial connections to media companies, and the documented damage to intelligence operations. This wasn't occasional background conversations with reporters. This was systematic espionage for personal and political gain. The jury deliberated for 2 days. On June 17, 2027, they returned guilty verdicts on 12 counts, unauthorized disclosure of classified information, 8 counts, conspiracy to defraud the United States, 2 counts, making false statements to Congress, 2 counts related to his lies about the whistleblower coordination. Sentencing came in August. Judge Harrington reviewed the evidence, the damage assessments, Schiff's lack of remorse. Mr. Schiff, you held a position of immense trust and responsibility. As chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, you had access to some of our nation's most closely guarded secrets. You swore an oath to protect those secrets. You violated that oath systematically for 5 years. You didn't leak occasionally because you thought the public needed to know something critical. You leaked routinely, strategically, for your own benefit. You built your career on being the serious intelligence expert who appeared on television explaining classified matters. You sold books based on your access to secrets. You took $2 million from a media company while feeding them classified intelligence. You coordinated a whistleblower complaint to create the predicate for impeachment, then lied about it. The damage you caused is severe and lasting. Intelligence sources were compromised, some killed. Operations were terminated. Allied relationships were damaged. The intelligence community lost trust in congressional oversight, all because you prioritized your political career over national security. The sentencing guidelines for these offenses, when aggregated across 12 counts, suggest a range of 12 to 20 years. I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison, to be served at a facility designated by the Bureau of Prisons. You are permanently barred from holding any federal position or security clearance. You will pay restitution to the United States government in the amount of $2.1 million, representing the book advance you received. Adam Schiff entered federal prison in October 2027. USP Lewisburg in Pennsylvania, a medium security facility that houses many white-collar criminals and some former government officials. He's currently 57 years old. With good behavior, he could be eligible for release in 2038 at age 78. His legacy is destroyed beyond repair. Not remembered as the brave congressman who stood up to Trump. Not celebrated as the defender of democracy who led impeachment. Remembered as the senator who sold classified secrets for fame and money. Remembered as the leak who compromised intelligence operations. Remembered as the liar who fabricated whistleblower complaints, then pretended they came through proper channels. The lesson resonated through Washington like thunder. You can oppose presidents vigorously. You can investigate them thoroughly. You can vote to impeach them. You can give speeches criticizing them. You can write books about their failures. But you cannot leak classified intelligence. You cannot read NSA intercepts to reporters. You cannot take millions from media companies while feeding them secrets. You cannot fabricate whistleblower complaints. You cannot lie to Congress and the American people. Eventually, the NSA will be monitoring communications. Eventually, federal judges will find probable cause for surveillance. Eventually, recordings of your voice will be played in a Senate hearing. Eventually, the evidence will be overwhelming. Eventually, 12 counts will carry 15 years in federal prison. Adam Schiff thought he was untouchable, thought his media celebrity protected him, thought being the resistance hero made him immune, thought his intelligence expertise meant he knew how to leak without getting caught. He was catastrophically wrong about all of it. The intelligence agencies were watching. The phone calls were recorded. The pattern was undeniable. The money trail was documented. The damage was assessed. The federal judges approved warrants. The evidence was presented. The jury convicted. The judge sentenced. And now Adam Schiff sits in a federal prison cell. His 15-year sentence a stark reminder that in America, nobody is above the law. Not presidents, not senators, not famous television personalities who think they're serving a higher cause. When you systematically leak classified intelligence, take money for it, lie about it, and compromise national security, you go to prison. That's not political persecution. That's not the end of democracy. That's justice working exactly as it should. The man who positioned himself as democracy's defender turned out to be one of its greatest threats, and he's paying the price, one day at a time, for the next 15 years. If you found this story compelling, consider subscribing to stay updated on more deep dives into political drama, power struggles, and the consequences that follow when trust is betrayed at the highest levels of government.